There has been a narrative about this conflict that has always put the Palestinians as victims. And the truth is they have been victims, but they've also been the victims of not having a leadership that was prepared to assume responsibility, a leadership that always wanted to present itself as victims. Palestinians are victims, but that's a condition. It shouldn't be a strategy.
So President Trump's role is really to be determined. It sounds as if get together and has a lot to do with what he decides he wants to do and what he's interested in. What about the new Gaza that's proposed by Jared Kushner, a $25 billion enterprise? And is that pie in the sky or something more?
Well, it's obviously something that would take a long time to develop. On the one hand, Gaza's been devastated. Imagine 80% of the buildings in Gaza have been either destroyed completely or partially destroyed. It is basically a devastated area, so you're dealing with a need for massive reconstruction. There are 60 million tons of rubble. It's interesting that Ali Shah, who is the head of the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza, he looks at that rubble as actually being raw material for some of the rebuilding. But you first have to clear it, you have to organize it, and that's going to take time. I think Jared's plan depends very heavily on the readiness of outsiders to invest in building this. And there's no question that there are some who see this as countries that see this as a kind of economic bonanza for them in terms of getting the contracts to rebuild. Obviously, Egypt's next door and counts very heavily on this, but I think Turkey also is looking at a lot of its contractors coming and playing a role on the ground there. The kind of great aspiration that I think Jared Kushner is and the vision he has for it, is it impossible to achieve? I'm not sure it's impossible to achieve, but I think the timeline is not a short timeline. I think it'll take a long period. I think it is critical that the mindset of Palestinians will be that this for them is something to be achieved. I want to mention something, Warren. I went into Gaza after Ariel Sharon announced that Israel was going to disengage, but before they withdrew. I went in the beginning of 2005. Israel withdrew completely from Gaza in September 2005. They withdrew. They had 8,000 settlers. They're all pulled out. The military they had there all pulled out. They were going to turn over basically the settlements that had been built there. In the end, they did not, because there was a kind of rivalry among Palestinians as to who would take it over. They ended up destroying that, but they didn't destroy the greenhouses. Hamas did come in and destroy the greenhouses, which would have been a benefit to Palestinians. I mentioned the point because I went in and I gave a talk to a couple hundred Palestinians there. And I said, you turned Gaza into a going concern. And it won't just be the international community. It'll be Israelis who will say, okay, then why not for the West Bank? But you turn it into a platform for attack against Israel. Who's going to take that failed model and say, gee, we should apply it elsewhere? Well, right now, you actually have the potential for an alternative Palestinian administration to transform Gaza, assuming Hamas doesn't block it by not disarming. And I think a great deal of pressure can be put on Hamas not to do that, especially if Turkey and Qatar are joining a kind of collective voice and saying you have to disarm or you're blocking the reconstruction, especially if Palestinians in Gaza will say that. The more there's a sense that there's an alternative, the more they are likely to say that. And the more you begin to validate an assumption of Palestinian responsibility and accountability, the more you can create an alternative vision. There has been a narrative about this conflict that has always put the Palestinians as victims. And the truth is they have been victims, but they've also been the victims of not having a leadership that was prepared to assume responsibility, a leadership that always wanted to present itself as victims. Palestinians are victims, but that's a condition. It shouldn't be a strategy. There is a potential to really create a new narrative for the Palestinians If you can transform Gaza, I think there's an interesting potential here. Can it produce the full image that Jared Kushner was talking about? I would love that to be the case. I suspect you're going to have multiple stages before you can get close to something like that.
Next week, it's going to be, Ron Brownstein with Pat Morrison.